Riccardo, are you saying that there should be term limits?
Mandated. We're going to have them in the A1 Constitution. And that applies to me too. I don't get to be king of the castle forever. I'll be in the initial period to make sure it's on track. But as soon as it's on track, then I have to face election like everybody else, and there'll be term limits for me too. And then when we become the party of government, which we will, both at a federal and state level, there'll be term limits for parliamentarians. Now, 2 or 3, make it reasonable because there's a learning curve, but then you're out. Oh, and by the way, no gold-plated parliamentary pension. Forget it. Because the theory goes, if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. So let's pay them well. Okay. And if you don't give them a good superannuation, they're going to take corrupt payments in order to survive because they're utterly unemployable. Well, both arguments have been demonstrably false. We've been paying good money. The Prime Minister is currently getting more money than Donald Trump is by a couple of 100,000.
You're kidding.
And what have we got as a Prime Minister? Silent Scott Morrison, protector of pedophiles. You're kidding me, right? Julia Gillard, hundreds of millions of dollars to the Clinton Foundation. Turnbull, hundreds of millions of dollars, $500 million almost to the Great Barrier Reef Fund that then I think found its way to the Clinton Foundation. So we're paying good money and we're not getting the best. We're not getting top flight people. So here's the deal, folks. You want to run the country? It's a part-time job. Get real life experience, get in, do your bit and get out. Term limits, absolutely, in the party and in Australia.
And people forget that it was the people that wrote the constitutions of the country. They weren't necessarily, politicians. They were people that were actually active in the world. They were explorers. They were people that were average people in the American case that came together. They were all intelligent. They all knew what they were talking about. And they were well read, well versed. And then they came together and they argued for hours. I don't think people like Joe Biden could stand up and argue for 8-10 hours like the founding fathers of the US Constitution.
What a remarkable group of men. And it is extraordinary. And Australians will need to study American history, and this part in particular. And here's why. They were, as you said, just average people, but of extraordinary intelligence, and I don't think ever before a group of men with that level of wisdom, profound wisdom and patience have been together. But they created this experiment in self-government. And the process was quite prolonged. There was a piece called Common Sense by Thomas Paine, which put the case that they needed to have a constitution. So here's the need, step 1. Then the Confederation of States, the Articles of Confederation were written to bind together these individual states. And it was a good first attempt, but it was flawed. So then they actually had the Constitutional Convention, where they sat down and they beat into shape this constitution. Profoundly sound piece of work, along with the amendments that followed. And after that, they had what were called the Federalist Papers, where 3 of the wisest wrote and explained the underlying principles to the Constitution in order to sell it, because the state of New York was against it. They saw it as a grab for power. So there's this long process. And Australia One has already embarked on this process. And I wasn't going to discuss this yet, but here we are, because I think events are moving faster than we anticipated. But Australia needs a constitutional convention. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Our current constitution has been illegally amended. And a simple example is the Australia Act 1986, where the Queen was removed from the constitution without a referendum. Now, that's illegal. Now, whether you like the Queen or not is not the point, because it's been alleged that there have been many more amendments to the constitution. And every amendment to the constitution requires a referendum. This hasn't been done. So that's why one of our first policies under sovereignty is we return to the 1901 Constitution with its authorised amendments. But even that's not enough, because people are discovering that they have no rights. So whatever was intended by the founding fathers of Australia in 1901 is manifestly insufficient. So we require a constitutional convention for the Australian people to decide what they want. And I'm not talking about lunatics like Fitzsimon, who wants what Professor David Flint, the head of the Australian Institute for Constitutional Monarchy, described as the politicians' republic, where if that model had got up, the Prime Minister could more easily sack the President of Australia, because the idea was to replace the Governor-General with the President, more easily sack the President than he could sack his own driver. Now, this is entree to totalitarianism. I don't know if Fitzsimon is aware of that. or whether he's just dense or silly or wears a red bandana, or I have no idea what his motive is. I don't know him. I don't care anything about him. All I know is his idea is just dumb. So we need smart people to do this. This constitutional convention will require majority of the population, majority of the states to pass. It will take a long time. Now, the people of Australia better be careful, because all sorts of spivs, lies and crooks are going to slip little lines in there to push their agenda instead of the people's agenda. Let me finish on this, and this is important, and I want everyone listening to this show after this to go to Google and read the Declaration of Independence that was penned by Thomas Jefferson, and understand that this applies to us today. Unless we turn this around, unless we decide to take our future into our hands and create our own destiny, we are lost as a nation. But here's what they wrote. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, and I'm going to throw in, and women, were created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And to secure these rights, governments are instituted by men and women who derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. And when these governments become destructive to these ends, the people have the right to abolish that government and institute a new one. And that's what we need in Australia. We need the ability for the people to say, you've broken your promises, you are destroying our lives, our country, you are sacked, you're out. And as I've said before, that's why we have recall elections in the party, and we will have recall elections throughout Australia. So if your MP makes promises and breaks them, you can sack him and start again. That's what you need to do. Australia, we need to read the Declaration of Independence. We need to study the American Revolutionary War and understand that this is what is required for us to have our own destiny. Without it, we are lost. But with it, we have a chance to create the most extraordinary example of government by, of and for the people that the world has ever seen.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself, not at all.
There you go.
If you guys like that, share it. All right? If you agree with the ideas, share it. That's how these conversations have been going for 6 weeks now. That's how they've reached almost 500,000 people. We're not, Riccardo brings the fire, I bring the cameras, you guys share it. That's your end of the bargain, and get active. Read up on this stuff. But thanks, Riccardo, on that.